What challenges and changes have van dwellers in Bristol faced during the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic? This project will be a short documentary film exploring the life of people living within vehicles in Bristol during the pandemic and investigating changes and challenges they have had to work through, looking to ultimately answer the question of how safe they have felt during the outbreak, respective of the stay at home advice given by the government. This project will look to interview several individuals and couples who have been in such a situation to gather a broad perspective of experiences and opinions of the past year and how they have been aided through the progression of the virus. This will also look to reflect on the mental welfare of these individuals as well as the biological threat we are all facing, to explore a variety of ways their lives have been impacted and how things can or have been changed to improve their situation for the remaining length of the pandemic. In addition to this, the project will also look to interview organisations such as Bristol's Vehicles for Change and any other organisations related to the cause found in further research, to gain an overview of what laws and regulations affect van dwellers in Bristol and action they have taken with the council to provide temporary parking sites during the pandemic. Another element to the project will be interviews with Labour councillor Helen Godwin and/or the housing team she oversaw, working with Bristol Vehicles for Change, that were providing these temporary sites for those requiring isolation in their vans. This will look to explore how and why they created such a relationship with Vehicles for Change and the process that underwent creating such sites. As of 2019, there are around 200 people living in vans in and around Bristol, and while offering temporary sites to those living in vehicles during this time is a large progressive step towards acceptance of alternative accommodation, this comes with two main issues. One, what will happen to these sites and those living on them upon the conclusion of the pandemic, and two, when there are over 200 people living in vans and only 41 spaces across all three of these sites on Kingswear Road, Hengrove, and Sea Mills, what is being done for the other 159 people who are unable to access these sites? As we are now reaching hopefully the tail end of this pandemic, looking to an uncertain future is imaginably a concern for those living in vans. In 2019, several van dwellers made an impassioned plea to top councillors as they presented a 1,000 name petition asking to be left alone, upon the news that the council would be attempting to eradicate supposed antisocial behaviour and move those living into vans into temporary accommodation. Upon the start of the pandemic, this petition, alongside the direct action from Bristol Vehicles for Change, have taken to work with the council resulted in these temporary sites and a cease and desist on enforcement from neighbourhood enforcement teams. These actions, however, have been exclusively labelled as temporary measures and suggest that upon the conclusion of the COVID-19 pandemic, the status quo will return to attempting to outlaw or provoke difficulty for those participating in vehicle living. Alongside this, the minimal effort on temporary site space numbers suggests that the council hold relatively little regard for the safety and livelihood of those choosing not to live in standard housing. The juxtaposition of working with organisations to promote van safety with these temporary sites compared to the blanket-wide parking bans happening across the city to prevent parking for more than 2 hours without a residential pass explicitly highlights this complicity and exposes that the council may simply be doing the bare minimum to serve face on the issue. From this project, I'm hoping not only to gain some insight and education around living in vans within Bristol to aid my own transition to van life, but also to input within a progressive conversation on how Bristol City Council and those living in vans may be able to take some positives from the COVID-19 efforts and put them into practice in creating a more accepting environment for van dwellers beyond the pandemic. I wish also to gain an insight from the council, organisations, and van occupiers themselves on what could or should be done more effectively to promote the safety and livelihood of the van community, as even before the biological threat of COVID, van life in several instances has been a safety concern to many living in them, due to such hostility surrounding the existence of van living. This is comparable to many forms of alternative accommodation such as houseboats, which rather than receiving scrutiny in many instances will receive praise for their alternative outlook on housing possibilities. I'm looking to hopefully work closely with Bristol Vehicles for Change and their current crowd justice campaign in St Werburgh's with this project, if possible, and take this work forward post-submission. In regards to a project mapping timeline, I've created a week-by-week schedule of what I am aiming to achieve and when from now until the project submission. This involves my main schedule timeline throughout the project and an interchangeable week by week to do list for tasks needing to be complete each week to ensure I remain on schedule. The project will commence in 4 key stages. 1. Finalising research and creative inspiration and gathering my participants, including sourcing camera equipment. 2. Production weeks to gather the bulk of my footage and other elements of raw production work. 3. Editing and compiling the final project. And 4. Making final amendments prior to submission. This 4 stages of work flowed well within my previous project and spread out the workload effectively, allowing for key changes post group critique to maximise the potential of my project.